Hello and welcome to Tabletop Never Stop. Today I'll be sharing with you the process of painting this over 2 foot tall Cthulhu Miniature. He's a Kickstarter bonus from the game Cthulhu Death May Die by CMON Games, which is a great game, probably my favorite game of 2019, but that's not what we're here to talk about today. We're here to talk about this miniature. But before we do that, I want to briefly share with you how I became interested in Lovecraft and the Cthulhu mythos. The year was 1998, and my parents marched me into Barnes & Nobles and said, "This kid is just tearing through Animorph books and Drizzt Do'Urden novels. What should he read next?" And the clerk took a look at my cherubic face, I was about 10 years old, and he said, you should probably either read Stephen King or Lovecraft. Now, this was not the right answer. The right answer was probably Robert Jordan, to be honest. But I did walk out of there with my own copy of Firestarter, which I still have, and I went on to read basically everything Stephen King has ever written, and greatly enjoyed most of it. So I basically had dodged Lovecraft and the Cthulhu mythos at that point, and I wouldn't encounter it again until 2016. Ironically, I was reading a Stephen King novel called Revival, which was very much a modern retelling of a Lovecraft story, and even referenced him directly. So after that, I read several Lovecraft stories, including The Call of Cthulhu, and around the same time, I had gotten back into tabletop wargaming, and so I was painting lots of miniatures, and as a result, I've painted several Cthulhus already, although this one, of course, is by far the largest. And if you're all familiar with the fiction, it's very ironic to spend like hours and hours hunched over painting a Cthulhu miniature, because in the fiction, artists are actually compelled to like create depictions of him. So just a little bit of weird extra irony for you. And let's get on to how I paint this guy. Alright, so the first thing to do is take him in the shower and clean him off, get any factory dust off of him. A lot of people do this for like most miniatures, and I generally don't, but this being such a large undertaking, I decided not to skip this step. And then, of course, outside to dry him off, the miniature is hollow, and it actually turned out that there's a lot of water left inside him, and I had to drill a hole in the base to get the water out. Now I'm basing him in Citadel Death Guard Green. Now we're switching over to the airbrush. He's highlighted in Death World Forest, and then additionally highlighted with Elysian Green from above. It ended up not really being a huge factor, because then I also went over him in Ogren Camo on all the boils, because I knew I wanted them lighter because I was going to be spending a lot of time on the boils. The wings are a rucksack tan from P3. And the bony structures on the wings are jackbone from P3 again. Alright, so now we're onto these boils. Boils are probably the thing I spent the most time working on the entire miniature. And I'm actually using contrast paint here, Athermatic Blue. And I did these basically over and over again. Like, there's just so many angles to work on, and it's such a large miniature. It was a bit of a pain. Inside the pustules are Flesh Terror Red, also a contrast paint from Citadel. So here's a little tip that I found. Let's say we're working on this guy and we just don't like how much, look at all that red contrast paint that got out on the surface of the boil. So I'm just going to lick my thumb here and boom. And yep, I spent quite a bit of time staring at Cthulhu's booty. And of course, the bony protrusions on his shoulders and his claws and his toes are more Jack Brown. And now we're on to slapping a wash on him, which really makes all of this the gross skin and everything pop out. This is actually Reeklin Flesh Shade from GW. You know, maybe not necessarily the shade I would have picked like as the ideal choice, but I'm happy with how it turned out. And then I used it because that's what I had a lot of on hand, and I did cut it with some contrast medium again because that was what was on hand, and also like to give myself some extra room to work with, and also just because I didn't want it to overpower the miniature. And I'm actually pretty happy with the result. Okay, here's Cthulhu's eyes. I'm painting them Inferno Orange from P3. Around this point, my GoPro actually kind of died out on me, and so a large portion of the rest of this is going to be shot vertically. Might also take this opportunity to point out I shot a bunch of TikToks of this whole process, which might be worth a view if you're interested. I'll put a link in the description of the video, but it's the same as my YouTube channel, Tabletop Never Stop. Okay, now we're on to the tentacles. So airbrush these guys. This is Singar Blue Highlight from P3. And then we're going to airbrush some Arcane Blue, followed by some Underbelly Blue towards the bottom. And then finally we're going to top these tentacles off with Mara White on the tips. And then I sort of blend it all together with turquoise ink. This is how I generally do tentacles. You know, not necessarily this color, but like this process. There's the finished result. Okay, so now we're on to the base. So I masked him, and then of course threw a bag over him, and then just went to town on him with Chaos Black from CW. And then afterwards, I went in there with the airbrush and kind of cleaned up to the harder reach nooks and crannies. And then the base is actually all craft paint. So, you know, obviously I started black, and then dry brushed some raw umber on there, and then that yellow is raw sienna. I like this look. It's exotic without being otherworldly, and then the whole miniature is also covered in unbleached titanium. And so, of course, then these towers are basically just some craft paint that I darkened. So I dry brushed that on, and then I used the light and normal version of it, and then of course hit it with more unbleached titanium. And then what we're looking at here is I'm putting in Cygnus Yellow into the cracks. And I'm making a mess, but I'm going to clean it up when I'm done. And then after I fill up all the the magical runes with the yellow, I am going to put in some secret weapon orange wash. And then eventually I clean it up with this Great Coat Gray from P3. And then I dry brush the whole thing with unbleached titanium again to kind of blend it back into the rest of the ruin. Okay, and now we're on to the waves. This is Signar Blue Base. And then I'm going to highlight with Arcane Blue. And then finally hitting the crests of the waves with Mara White. And I guess I didn't collect any footage of it, but you can see I've painted the rims of a lot of the boils in very watered down Cygnus Yellow, trying to give it sort of an infected look. And now I'm just kind of finishing touches. I'm putting in some CW technical paint. It's basically like to make the boils look like they're full of some nasty mucus. All right, and here is the final product. My Giant Cthulhu took me 11 days to complete. I didn't keep super good timekeeping, but I would imagine I spent about 24 hours on him, often working pretty deep into the night. It took me 34 different types of paint, and it was a pretty fun project. I don't really know of any models that are similar, and certainly don't want to start collecting other large models because where would you keep them? But I had a pretty good time with this project, and hopefully you enjoyed learning about it. Thanks so much for watching.